my fellow wanderers. I'm Jay Rekwar, the Wandering Fantasy Author, and you're with me on Pondering the Orb. Please like, subscribe, and let's get on the march. A staple of children's literature and fantasy, the Chronicles of Prydain continue to refresh themselves with each new generation, speaking to Lloyd Alexander's lasting literary achievement and influence he still continues to exert on our favorite genre to this day. My mom read these to me when I was 5, and when I started reading them for this show, I still remembered. Taking from the Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander, let's read from the first novel in the series, The Book of Three. The Book of Three by Lloyd Alexander. Book 1 in the Chronicles of Prydain. Chapter 1. The Assistant Pigkeeper. Taryn wanted to make a sword, but Cole, charged with the practical side of his education, decided on horseshoes. And so it had been horseshoes all morning long. Taryn's arms ached. Soot blackened his face. At last he dropped the hammer and turned to Cole, who was watching him critically. "Why?" Taryn cried. "Why must it be horseshoes? As if we had any horses!" Cole was stout and round, and his great bald head glowed bright pink. "Lucky for the horses," was all he said, glancing at Taryn's handiwork. "I could do better at making a sword," Taryn protested. "I know I could." And before Cole could answer, he snatched the tongs, flung a strip of red-hot iron to the anvil, and began hammering away as fast as he could. "Wait," cried Cole. "That is not the way to go after it." Heedless of Cole, unable to hear him above the din, Taryn pounded harder than ever. Sparks sprayed the air. But the more he pounded, the more the metal twisted and buckled, until finally the iron sprang from the tongs and fell to the ground. Taryn stared in dismay. With the tongs he picked up the bent iron and examined it. "Not quite the blade for a hero," Cole remarked. "It's ruined," Taryn glumly agreed. "It looks like a sick snake," he added ruefully. "As I tried telling you," said Cole, "you had it all wrong. You must hold the tongs so. When you strike, the strength must flow from your shoulder and your wrist to be loose. You can hear it when you do it right. There's a kind of music to it. Besides," he added, "this is not the metal for weapons." Cole returned the crooked, half-formed blade to the furnace, where it lost its shape entirely. "I wish I might have my own sword," Taryn sighed. "And you would teach me sword fighting." "Whisht!" Cole cried. "Why would you want to know that? We have no battles in Caer Dallben." "We have no horses either," objected Taryn, "but we're making horseshoes." "Get on with you," said Cole, unmoved. "That is for practice." "And so would this be," Taryn urged. "Come, teach me the sword fighting. You must know the art." Cole's shining head glowed even brighter. A trace of a smile appeared on his face, as though he were savoring something pleasant. "True," he said quietly. "I have held a sword once or twice in my day." "Teach me now," pleaded Taryn. He seized a poker and brandished it, slashing at the air and dancing back and forth over the hard-packed earthen floor. "See," he called, "I know most of it already." "Hold your hand," chuckled Cole. "If you were to come against me like that, with all your posing and bouncing, I should have chopped you into bits by this time." He hesitated a moment. "Look at you," he said quickly. "At least you should know there's the right way and the wrong way to go about it." He picked up another poker. "Here now," he ordered, with a sooty wink. "Stand like a man." Taryn brought up his poker. While Cole shouted instructions, they set to parrying and thrusting, and with much banging, clanking, and commotion. For a moment Taryn was sure he had had the better of Cole, but the old man spun away with amazing lightness of foot. Now it was Taryn who strove desperately to ward off Cole's blows. Abruptly, Cole stopped. So did Taryn, his poker poised in midair. In the doorway of the forge stood the tall, bent figure of Dallben. Dallben, master of Caer Dallben, was 379 years old. His beard covered so much of his face he always seemed to be peering over a gray cloud. On the little farm, while Taryn and Cole saw to the plowing, sowing, weeding, reaping, and all the other tasks of husbandry. Dalvin undertook the meditating, the occasion so exhausting he can accomplish it only by laying down and closing his eyes. He meditated an hour and a half following breakfast, and again later in the day. The clatter from the forge had aroused him from his morning meditation. His robe hung askew over his bony knees. "Stop that nonsense directly," said Dalvin. "I'm surprised at you," he said, frowning at Cole. "There's serious work to be done." "It wasn't Cole," Taryn interrupted. "It was I who asked to learn swordplay." "I did not say I was surprised at you," remarked Dalvin. "But perhaps I am, after all. I think you had best come with me." Taryn followed the ancient man out of the forge, across the chicken run, into the white thatched cottage. There, in Dalvin's chamber, moldering tomes overflowed the sagging shelves and spilled onto the iron floor amid heaps of iron cookpots, studded belts, harps with or without strings, and other oddments. Taryn took his place on the wooden bench, as he always did when Dalvin was in the mood for giving lessons or reprimands. "I fully understand," said Dalvin, setting himself behind his table. "In the use of weapons, as in everything else, there is a certain skill. But wiser heads than yours will determine when you should learn it." "I'm sorry," Taryn began. "I should not have—" "I'm not angry," Dalvin said, raising a hand. "Only a little sad. Time flies quickly. Things always happen sooner than one expects. And yet," he murmured almost to himself, "it troubles me. I fear the Horde King may have some part in this." "The Horde King?" asked Taryn. "We shall speak of them later," said Dalvin. He drew a ponderous, leather-bound volume toward him, the Book of Three, from which he occasionally read to Taryn, and which, the boy believed, held in its pages everything anyone could possibly want to know. "As I have explained to you before," Dalvin went on, "and you have very likely forgotten, Prydain is a land of many cantrivs, of small kingdoms, and many kings, and of course there are war leaders who command the warriors." "But there is the High King above them all," said Taryn. "Math, son of Mathnoi. His war leader is the mightiest hero in Prydain. You told me of him, Prince Gwydion." "There are other things you do not know," Dalvin said, "for the obvious reasons that I have not told you. For the moment I am less concerned about the realms of the living than with the land of the dead, with Eluveitie." Taryn shuddered at the word. Even Dalvin had spoken in a whisper. "And with King Aeon, Lord of Eluveitie," Dalvin said. "Know this," he continued quickly. "Eluveitie is more than a land of death. It is a treasure house, not only of gold and jewels, but of all things of advantage to men. Long ago the race of men owned these treasures. By craft and deceit, Aeon stole them, one by one, for his own evil uses. Some few of the treasures have been wrested from him, though most lie hidden deep in Eluveitie, where Aeon guards them jealously." "But Aeon did not become the ruler of Prydain," Taryn said. "You may be thankful he did not," said Dalvin. "He would have ruled it if not for the children of Dawn, sons of the Lady Dawn and her consort Belen, king of the sun. Long ago they voyaged to Prydain from the summer country and found the land rich and fair, though the race of the men had little for themselves. The sons of Dawn built their stronghold at Caer far north in the Eagle Mountains. From there they helped regain at least a portion of what Aeon had stolen, and stood as guardians against the lurking threat of Eluveitie." "I hate to think what would have happened if the Sons of Dawn hadn't come," Taryn said. "It was a good destiny that brought them." "I'm not always sure," said Dalvin, with a wry smile. "The men of Prydain came to rely on the strength of the House of Dawn as a child clings to its mother. They do so even today. Math, the High King, is descended from the House of Dawn. So is Prince Gwydion. But that is all by the way. Prydain has been at peace, as much as men can be peaceful, until now." "What you do not know," Dalvin said, "is this. It has reached my ears that a new and mighty warlord has risen, as powerful as Gwydion. Some say more powerful. But he is a man of evil, for whom death is a black joy. He sports with death as you might sport with a dog." "Who is he?" cried Taryn. Dalvin shook his head. "No man knows his name, nor has any man seen his face. He wears an antlered mask, and for this reason he is called the Horn King. His purposes I do not know. I suspect the hand of Aeon, but in what manner I cannot tell. I tell you now for your own protection, Dalbin added. For what I saw this morning, your head is full of nonsense about feats of arms. Whatever notions you may have, I advise you to forget them quickly. There's an unknown danger abroad. You are barely on the threshold of manhood, and I have a certain responsibility to see that you reach it, preferably with a whole skin. So, you are not to leave Caer Dallben under any circumstances, not even past the orchard, and certainly not into the forest. Not for the time being. For the time being, Taryn burst aloud. I think it will always be for the time being, and it will always be vegetables and horseshoes all of my life. Sometimes an author needs no name other than what they offer us, and if Lorelei the Berserker is an account of anything, Sword Sorcery should pay attention to Bludgeon. Let's read from Lorelei the Berserker by Bludgeon. Lorelei the Berserker by Bludgeon. 1. The Pit. There were no large city centers in the vast untamed lands west of the treacherous Triple Rivers, colloquially known as the Demon's Tongue. But, in the north of one great valley full of heather-covered hills and scattered trees, miles from the nearest respectable town, was a notable village called Grun. Every week, Grun would swell in size as people flocked to see it from far and wide, to partake in the excesses it provided, like flies swarming a rotten corpse. They came in caravans, wagons, by horse and foot, frothing at the mouth, eager for some sort of release from their mundane lives. There were some who came, not for distraction, but commerce, seeking money-making opportunities and the information that flooded in with the wayfarers. Grun sat at an important crossroad, and was frequented by many merchants, dealmakers, spies, thieves, and plotters of all sorts. The village itself was a mass of slightly crooked brick and timber buildings that encircled the base of a wide yet short hill with a very gentle rise and a broad, flat top. A mix of great tents with flowing banners and small shacks with crude wooden signs covered the sides and top of the hill in an odd jumble that mirrored the intermingling menagerie of revelers hosted by the village each week. The openness of the fields around Grun allowed for a steady wind to blow across it and remove the lurid, suggestive, and disgusting smells that constantly accumulated on the hill. Reenacted every 6 days, Grun played host to a 2-day festival of hedonism and debauchery, unmatched in all of the western kingdoms. This notoriety brought many travelers and much wealth into Grun, and tonight's festivities were no different. As the sun set, the sound of music grew louder, the laughter increased, and as the air filled with excitement, a cloaked person with a hood drawn up passed through the cobblestone streets of Grun and began to climb the hill. They had arrived 2 days prior, but had preferred to camp in a field south of the village rather than mingle at an inn with other travelers. This person was a woman, though it was impossible to tell as her dark cloak covered her entire body, while her face receded into the darkness that her hood provided. Her name was Lorelei. She walked with purpose among the tents and masses of uncouth revelers, and was careful to avoid the strange puddles and little streams left by the crowds during their exuberant and volatile merrymaking. She kept her eyes forward, and gave no heed to the spectacles she passed or the moans that lifted above the cheers and applause. At a glance, she seemed nothing more than a shadow moving amongst the mirth and writhing flesh. She was headed towards the very center of this debauched festival where, at the top of the hill, in the center of the great tents and shacks, stood an ancient stone-lined pit where terrible games of violence were played out amidst a backdrop of cheers and laughter. Known far and wide, only the fiercest and most foolish fighters dared the brutality of the pit of Grun. And that was exactly why Lorelei had come to this wasteland of a realm. As she neared the top of the hill, the tents faded to leave only a swarming mass of humanity that laughed, cursed, and drank amidst its reek and vomit. The air was illuminated by dozens of large torches on poles and wide braziers on the ground, making sure no hedonistic acts went unseen. It was wild exuberance, drunkenness, and carnal desire. the likes of which Lorelei had never witnessed. Above the bounding, jubilant heads of the crowd, she could see two well-worn stone totems, a good 30 feet apart. She assumed that these eldritch figures marked the entrance to the pit. With a smirk, she pushed her way through the drunken revelers until she could see a large table set against the nearest totem. A robed man with a graying beard and a broad blue hat adorned with a peacock's feather held a book and scribbled furiously as he yelled and chatted with various people around him. This must be the pitmaster, thought Lorelei, and in a town built upon communal inhibition and famous for violence, he was the de facto mayor and voice of authority. She approached the pitmaster as he hurriedly wrote marks in his large book. He glanced at her quickly, and before he could turn away, he was caught by her piercing green eyes and her cloaked form. She was clearly not part of the raucous crowd, but someone here to conduct business of some sort. The pitmaster closed his book and faced her. He could make out her sharp, clean chin and small nose under her large and luminous eyes. "I am the pitmaster of Grun," he said with a small bow. "How may I assist you, my lady?" "I am here to fight in the pit," said Lorelei. "You are expecting me?" Stammered the pitmaster, momentarily at a loss for words. "I am Lorelei from the Blue Isle," she said. "I sent a boy in advance to deliver my marker." "Ah, yes," recovered the pitmaster. "He delivered it. Have you fought in pits before?" "None such as this," purred Lorelei with a relaxed and almost detached tone. "I see," he said, tipping his head. "We have never had a fighter from the Blue Isle before." "I expect not," said Lorelei. "It is small, covered with nothing but farmsteads and goat herds. An inconsequential place. Hardy folk they are, but not warlike, and they would blanch and die if they were to see the frivolities of Grun." The pitmaster looked about, and the nearest merchants were studying the cloaked newcomer dubiously, shaking their heads. Like this throng of experienced gamblers, the pitmaster knew that women rarely entered the pit, and when they did it made for poor and pitiful fights. In his many years as master, only one woman had ever made a good showing in this crucible of murder and violence, and he was loath to allow another into his hallowed arena. But custom dictated all comers would be given equal chance to prove themselves in the pit. Few laws were observed in Grun, but the laws of the pit were always upheld and respected. It had been thus since long before Grun existed, when the pit sat alone atop its ancient hill to welcome any seeking fortune and glory. "And you are aware of the status of this great arena," began the master tactfully. "It is a hard mistress, if you pardon the expression. It grinds through the strongest flesh. Even victors are left maimed and wasted. Once you enter, there is no turning back." "I am well aware of the reputation of your pit," said Lorelei coolly. She expected this attempt at dissuasion and was eager to get it over with. "If you still wish to fight," said the pitmaster slowly, "then we will begin when you are ready." Lorelei's green eyes pierced the shadows of her hood like eldritch candles in the darkness. She remained silent and motionless for several long minutes, causing whispers to begin moving through the crowd. Many bets were placed, and hushed conversations debated how quickly she would die. Slowly she reached up and pulled back her hood, keeping her eyes fixed on the pitmaster. Lorelei's hair was pale blonde and cut short so that it hung just past the bottom of her strong, sharp jawline. Her bangs were held out of her eyes by a leather headband centered with a green gem. Glittering rings studded her nostrils and both ears. She was lovely and seemed to many nearby, much too young to face this pit or any other. My friends, I'm pleased to welcome back Eluveitie. Taken from the new album Anv, this is Aeon of the Crescent Moon. One of the cream of the crop in Synthwave, KILLSTAR is a name everyone here should know, with 2 great albums and a ton of great singles you should all go out there and get. We bring one of those tracks to Pondering the Orb. Featuring the virtuoso saxophonist Max Cruz, this song by KILLSTAR is called Neon Rain. That's our show. Please check out all the books and music in the links below. We'll be back soon, and safe journeys.